So I think part of the immense change that's happening within the financial services is obviously driven a lot by the new challenger banks and also the fintech community. The whole ecosystem is really changing fundamentally. And I really wonder, how can established players work with new challenger banks like Starling Bank?
I think probably it's best illustrated by a bit of my history and the sort of organisations I've been involved in. I've worked for the very biggest banks, sort of dealing with big legacy problems. And then I spent some time in the fintech world where everything was happening quicker, everything was happening in a very agile way, and the problems weren't seen as big problems. Everything was something you could tackle in a day or two. I took some of those techniques into the big organisations again, and I got some success in implementing it because it is possible to use some of those techniques in big banks. It is possible to come up with processes in order to facilitate agile innovation and creativity and deliver those products to customers. But you can't go all the way, and that's why I decided to start Starling Bank. Because we're talking today about business and IT and as if they're two different parts of an organisation. Modern businesses, fintech, businesses are now run as one. At Starling Bank, we don't have technology department and a business department. We don't have the words. Everything is about giving things and delivering something different to customers. In the fintech world at the moment, well, in London, you can dine out any night of the week at some sort of fintech party or other. If the big banks aren't sponsoring the hackathon, they have an Innoventures fund, or they have an incubator. That is all about big banks spending a tiny little bit of their budget on using that to get ideas from these fintechs. But many of these fintechs won't grow and prosper because it's very, very difficult to get consumer products to marketplace, and they'll end up selling their ideas and their technologies to the bigger banks. And that's why Starling is a bank, not a fintech. We have a banking license because that's the way we believe that we can actually deliver our technology to the customer base.
Okay. Does that resonate with some of the startups that you're working with, Francisco?
Well, it does. I mean, if you think about the term fintech, I think in 10 years we're not going to be using the term fintech. I cannot agree more with Anne, which is saying technology and business. I mean, I cannot imagine one business that is not technology, and in financial services, it's just so embedded. But also the term legacy and fintech will disappear. It would just be how you run your business. The only difference is that it's easier for people to build products that either compete with established players or that work with established players. So in that sense, you've seen a lot of that, a great amount of that work.
Okay. And in terms of your experience, Anthony, being a part of a big bank like Société Générale, how are you seeing it, and how do you interact with the fintechs?
Okay, well, the first thing I'd say, I would agree that everyday banks become more technology-centric. I'd also agree that the term fintech is probably transitory, all right? We always have had technology companies in financial services. Obviously, what people are referring to is the emergent fintech sector and the energy that's gone into that. And the thinking around technologies and what you can do with technology now as it evolves. And I think that's recognised very much by us. We have an open innovation approach where we have got heavily involved in the fintech community in London and elsewhere. And I think that brings a lot of energy, and it does bring a lot of good ideas. And also there are products and business models that we can leverage off from the fintechs without just trying to take ideas and implement it a different way. I think it's recognising that those fintechs can be leveraged on, and that's why we're actively evolving our culture, adapting our systems to facilitate that.
Well, what do you think are the big challenges? I'm going to throw this question out there. What do you think are the big challenges to really having these small fintechs organizations really scale up? Do they need to collaborate more with the banks in order to do that? And what role are the regulators playing in this system?
I think one observation I would take is that the large banks are participating in this marketplace in many different ways. They're buying them. they're investing in them, they are hiring the people from them, they are participating in accelerators. We see that all, and that will continue. However, I think to the large established organisations, one of the biggest challenges I see is how do you filter through that sort of ecosystem? How do you pick the organisations that are the winners or the ones that you feel you can work with, both from a point of view of what their product idea is, but also whether you feel as though the technology and the business robustness is there. So I think that's a real challenge for the sort of consumers of fintechs. I think on the fintech side of the equation, I would say they kind of broadly fall into two categories. You know, there are organisations that are looking to nibble away at the rich profit areas or for certain consumer areas of the banks, and that is for sure going to continue. But there are also fintechs that are actually looking to be a provider of platforms that many banks will use, and the two are very, very different. And in that regard, I think that community of fintechs, you know, really struggles sometimes to have the access to the market. You know, particularly if they're in a particular geography and they want to go to Asia or North America or vice versa. So how do they, as a relatively small organisation, how do you get into that market? And then the second challenge I think they have is, how do you convince somebody who is running a highly regulated organisation safely and secure to work with you? And how do you sort of work and ultimately either sit alongside or integrate into existing organisations? So I think, you know, my observation would be there is an awful lot of collaboration going on between those two communities, but actually getting it to live is actually a real challenge for both communities.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, I agree about this use of the term fintech, and it just occurred to me, I mean, what is IBM apart from the world's first fintech company? The company started in the general computing age by doing tabulating machines and everything else for finance. Core banking has always been run on computers. So there's nothing new in that aspect of finance. I think, and you brought it up earlier, I think the more revolutionary bit is that has been done with technology, but back office functions have not. And there's a lot that can be taken out of the cost and processing and automation of the bank by fixing that. And of course, the digital experiences as well. So I believe it's a transient thing. I also think that you're right, that saying, there aren't that many examples of a massive bank you're relying exclusively on the services of a 6-person fintech company. But that doesn't need to be the limit of how the system works. It is a cultural change. People in fintech will go into banks, vice versa. There's a lot to learn from each other. A lot of these accelerators are not particularly because that those individual companies will be individually successful, but because we're growing an ecosystem where people can better talk and better exchange ideas. I think there's also a maturity issue that, as I said, small fintech companies are going to struggle, but they are getting bigger. And especially B2B ones who are working with banks. There are several companies that are now getting to a pretty decent size, and the size that a bank, can look at as a reliable long-term supplier, and that's just a maturity of the market, and so it's a transient thing, and I think it's going in the right way. But I think a lot of these problems will take care of itself just as everybody gets to know each other a bit better.
I think it's here to stay. I was a computer science graduate back in 1981, joining Lloyds Bank. At that point, technology was not important to the whole organisation. We've been centralised and we've been outsourced, and we've become less important, but now we are very important. Everybody on the board is talking about technology, and everybody is talking about fintech. And I think we're here to stay. I think technology and the part technology plays in finance, whether retail banking or investment banking, is getting more and more important and more powerful. So I think that it's a change in the whole understanding and the importance of technology in everybody's everyday lives. And I think that I'm proud now to be, part of this community. All of a sudden, you're very, very welcome every sort of table.
Could I just say one thing that's really important to your point, which is your point on fintech, which is the real ingredients of the organisations that I've seen and talked to recently is they have a great business idea for how it will improve something for the customer. Mm-hmm. That's it. And the reason why I think a lot of the existing community want to engage with that community is less about the technology and more about the what's your business idea. So, you know, I think you're absolutely right around the terminology of fintech. It's really all about business model disruption. It's really all about something different that hasn't been thought about, that has some value to the consumer and the organisation. So I'm completely with you in terms of the wrong phraseology.
I agree 100%. I think it's basically, it's not that you can build anything or everything, but you can. It's not. That's not the hard part. The hard part is understanding whether there's actually a need, user experience, market opportunity, or a pain that you're solving. That's the hard part to prove. It's not that technology then is not hard, but that actually will happen. Infrastructure is not an issue anymore. Code eventually will not be an issue. Everything will be open. It's actually getting that part of understanding that customer.